Oh, hey there. Yeah, sorry about that. Just having a little snack. How's everyone doing? Today we're gonna talk about Deftones' new album, Ohms. Oh, I've been so excited about this one. You don't even know. It's been 4.5 years since their last studio album, which many people were disappointed with that album, but I still really enjoyed it. It was a bit more subdued than their previous work, but still had the heaviness and atmospherics. But Chino Moreno had taken the reins on that one more so than Steph Carpenter, so he didn't have as much input. So with this release, they told the audience that they were going to be working together more, that they actually had Chino, Steph, and Abe Cunningham, the drummer, sit in a triangle in their studio that they actually recorded some of their early albums in I believe Los Angeles, correct me if I'm wrong. And they just kind of riffed off each other, no pun intended, as the core unit, because they are the surviving founding members of the band. And then they took those ideas to the other members and had their input as well. With this release, every member gets their own, gets the same amount of time to incorporate what they're best at. Probably more so than any other album. Especially Frank Delgado, he gets so much time to utilize his strengths as a DJ, but like he incorporates synth, keyboard, samples, just all sorts of, like, anything to do with the atmospherics is attributed to him. And he actually takes the lead within certain sections of the songs, more so than he has ever done. Coming into this, I was expecting it to be heavier than what it came out as. And why I believed that is because Chino had said that this album is going to be considerably heavier than the last album, which I didn't think the last album was necessarily not heavy. There were some very heavy songs, like some of their heaviest songs, in fact, but you could say that about all their albums. They have one song that rivals the rest of their heavy songs, but especially the song Gore was very heavy. But I think he was correct in that almost every song has a significant riff that is a significant part of the song, but they're not the focus of the songs. It's more adding another layer to the songs, and even a lot of times the guitar riffs are buried in the mix, but not to the point where they're not audible. It's just they're blended into the sound more so. I feel like with this album they kind of gave Stephen Carpenter what he wanted, in like having him utilize his strengths and what he likes, which is metal riffing. And that is present throughout the album, but it's not overutilized to the point where you could even call this a metal album. I think even more so than Gore, this feels like them finally embracing being rock artists. And I don't mean that as a pejorative, because I feel like they're finally becoming the rock stars that they wanted to be. At least Chino seemed to want to be, like who he idolized from the 80s, like Morrissey and Robert Smith, and the members of Depeche Mode. They finally fulfilled that. The songs are catchier than ever. There's a gloss to the production that I hadn't previously seen. Everything sounds very clean, even more so than on Koino Yokim, which was from a technical standpoint, their most well-produced album before. I do prefer Diamond Eyes to their other production styles. That album it had kind of a watery, like kind of more atmospheric sound, but it didn't sound completely compressed. Like you could still catch all of the instruments, and it still felt heavy and bassy, but it had that romantic quality that I appreciate about shoegaze music. And this album is missing that to a degree, but I think the production style fits the actual songs in this very well. Terry Date is the producer for this album, and he was the producer for their first 4 albums. He was kind of heralded as helping to create the Deftones sound, and with this, he furthers their sound more than they have in a long time. I think they, after with Diamond Eyes, they kind of solidified a certain formula, and for the last few albums they've followed that formula. With this, they're completely breaking out of that, and it's mostly good. I think this is a great album, but there are aspects that kind of rub me the wrong way. At least it did at first, and it's growing on me for sure. I think this is going to become like a classic in the same vein that White Pony and Diamond Eyes were. And the weird thing about that is those albums came out in 2000 and 2010 respectively. So this is 2020 that Ohms is releasing in. So they seem to have a special knack for having a classic or masterpiece album every 10 years. And then they have 2 albums in between each of those. And I think before each of these classic albums, like you can debate whether or not they're their best albums, but it seems like their consensus is more so that they are. That before them, there's a transition album, a transitionary album. So they'll have like one album, say the first album was kind of like, it created the template for nu metal, but it also was kind of standard, like it sounds standard now to like what was going on at the time. But then Around the Fur was a transition into more experimental territory, and then White Pony was very different from their previous albums. And then their self-titled album is very kind of traditional Deftones, kind of staying the course. And Saturday Night Wrist was transitioning into the more dreamy style. And you can go so on and so forth. And with this album, it's both more accessible and less accessible at the same time. I think this is their proggiest album, which I didn't think they would make anything proggier than Koi no Yokin, but this does push their sound further, it progresses it. There are a lot more musical interludes, or experimental interludes, or synth interludes. For instance, the synth intro to the second single, Genesis, reminds me a lot of Burzum, the black metal band from early 90s. I'm gonna butcher it, Tomet. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's a very long instrumental song that it's mostly just a synth going through, and it's incredibly eerie, and probably not the least because of the accusations that that band has gotten, particularly the lead singer. But I love that song, and this song, the synth prelude, sounds a lot like that, and that leads into the song. That song is one of my favorites. I loved it when it was released as a single, which was only a little over a week ago, but seems like eternity now. But that is the most standard Deftones song on this album. It has the heavy detuned guitars, not to the degree that it was on Koi no Yokin. They're not going full Meshuggah, but it's definitely that doomy binary guitar. And they have some very otherworldly vocal harmonies on here, particularly in the bridge. And this song just comes swinging out the gate, like it has the confidence that they did on Koi no Yokin. I find the bridge on this song gets a little away from what the song's supposed to be, especially with the tempo change, but then it comes back at the end with the heaviness. And my favorite part is when the first time the chorus transitions back into the verse, it just comes in swinging, and it's just so, it just feels so right. The second song of this album, entitled Ceremony, is probably my favorite non-single cut. This also is pretty traditional Deftones territory. I love how the chorus comes in early. It fits so perfectly. Oh man, I can't get enough of, in the second chorus, there are multiple choruses. There's 2 choruses in the song, or I think it's called the post-chorus, but I'll just call it the second chorus. And he comes in at the end of that with grit in his voice, and he says, "One kiss, one caress." The way that he says it, I've never heard him sing like that, and it sounds really good. I think this song has something to do with the protagonist of the song foreseeing their death or possibly taking their own life. That's my interpretation of it anyways. And I feel like the next few songs kind of go with that theme, or maybe even story. This isn't a concept album per se, but it has the feel of a concept album, and there's themes that continue on from song to song, certain lyrics or words that are in multiple songs. The song Urantia has the fastest riff I've ever heard Steph play in a Deftones song, but that's contrasted with one of the more peaceful sections I've ever heard in at least one of their rock songs, not necessarily one of their like really quiet ballady type songs. But the verse comes in, seems calm, kind of almost cheerful, but then the riff from the beginning is overlaid on the verse, and so it's sort of this weird contrast. Like, it still sounds peaceful and happy, but then it has momentum with the riff. And then we get more traditional kind of like sludgy riffs towards the end, and then the fast thrash riff, I forgot to mention that it was a thrash type riff that was at the beginning, comes in at the end. And the way that they have the drumming, have Abe drumming, is very unusual. He's drumming with the rhythm of the guitars with the fast riff, but he doesn't follow it necessarily. He like fills it in, like here and there, like duh, 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 duh. That's not exactly how it goes, but it's kind of like that. It's not it's not thrash drumming, which Steph has been on record saying he asked Abe to actually use a double bass drum in songs before, and Abe refused, which I agree that would completely ruin like what Deftones are. They're not like a fast thrash type band. Their music is more based on groove and mood and just like head bobbing, and you want it to feel smooth. And so I think they found a compromise with that. He's like, I'll go along with the riff and I'll do a little bit of fast drumming here and there, but I'm not doing like really fast or anything, which it's a weird combination, but it somehow works. It works because all the members have diverging interests, and they all kind of come together they coalesce into something beautiful. The song "The Link Is Dead" is probably the most directly angry that Chino has ever been in a song. Like the way he spits his verses, it's pure hatred, and even says hatred within the lyrics a few times. I think he said pure hatred. And it's not like the most aggressive or screamy that he's been, but you actually feel the intent of his vocals and his lyrics. And I think that speaks for the entire album as a whole. You feel the intent of the creators. They wanted to create something that was meaningful and emotional. I think this is the most emotional record they've ever made. And it really comes through with the music. They didn't just want to make an album just that was like their past albums, just kind of floated by in a haze, and it's good for like smoking weed or whatever, just chilling out, but also aggressive so you can mosh to it. But with this, I feel it's more of an album to listen to intently. Like, you kind of have to pay attention to it. You can't really relax to it necessarily, which is kind of similar to White Pony. And that album I tend to not listen to as much as other albums, which I foresee this album is going to be the same thing. Even though I think White Pony is a classic and has some of my favorite songs from them on it. But it's kind of an uncomfortable listen. And this, I feel like that about this album. But I love the way on This Link Is Dead, how he sings, "I have no patience now for expectation, wow." Like, the way he says it, he just sounds like a really snotty high school girl. Like, it's just so much attitude, like just like talking back to their parents or something. Oh man, it's great. It always makes me smile. Radiant City is another one of my favorites on this album. It has probably the best riff. Like, it's very meaty, but it still doesn't go full force. Like, the only song that does really is the first song, Genesis, but also, I guess, The Spell of Mathematics does kind of go hard, but it's more of a crushing, like, post-metal kind of riff. It's not like really crunchy. It is kind of, but it's buried in the mixed more so. That is probably the heaviest song, but Radiant City has kind of the most kind of spunk and energy in terms of the heavy songs. But it also has a restraint that kind of gives you, like, it has this tension that kind of gives you anxiety, like you want it to fully explode, but it doesn't, which is exemplified with the bridge, where he's like, "Where's the ledge? I can touch it, it's so close." Like, you can almost feel falling off grabbing on the ledge, something happening, but it doesn't quite happen. But then we go into the chorus, which is so incredibly beautiful and like nostalgic feeling, because it reminds me of the song "Cry Little Sister" from the Lost Boys soundtrack. It has a similar melody, but it doesn't feel like a ripoff. But it really gives me the feels, though. Speaking of feels, the song "Headless" is the penultimate track, and it has a bridge that has vocal harmonies that are just so beautiful. Like, Chino is harmonizing with himself, and it's actually teased a little bit in after the first chorus. You hear like the ooh of the bridge like coming in, but then it doesn't quite go into it. It goes into the next verse and then the chorus and then the bridge comes in. That is masterclass songwriting and producing right there. It's just, it sets up the song, like the tension builds throughout the song. And that's through many of the songs in this album and through many of the songs that Deftones have ever done. They're craftsmen at like building tension and releasing it. But with this album, I feel like they didn't release the tension as often, which adds to the overall feeling of tension throughout the album. And then the closing track is Ohms. That was the first single for the album. And I felt that was a solid track when I first heard it, and I still feel that, but I think it does work better as a closer. It feels like the ending credits for a movie, like we finally made it. And it's kind of interesting that the opening and closing tracks were the second and first singles. They're sort of the bookends for the album, and they're the only two songs that feel like they have a full, like they feel like full songs in the sense that they feel the most kind of Deftones-like, but also they're pure rocking songs. Like, all of the other songs kind of have a give and take, and lead you in directions you don't think are gonna go. But with these two songs, they kind of give you that satisfying punch. You're like, yes, it feels good. Like, you don't feel quite that anxiety. And so I think they did that on purpose, releasing those as singles. The opening song being aggressive, version of kind of that satisfying rock song, but then the last song being kind of like euphoric, like, okay, maybe things are going to be okay version of a rock song. And the sequencing of the album is great. And the fourth song on the album, Error, it has it doesn't, like, the first part of it like didn't really gel with me so much, but then the last section of the song is probably the most gorgeous thing they've ever done. Like, it's almost tear-jerkingly so. It has this soaring quality that Chino has definitely been influenced by his own work in Palms and also Crosses. And since those two albums released in 2013 and 14 respectively, he's been incorporating those sounds into Deftones more and more. He did on Gore, and I think he does more so in this. And there's a few times where he really incorporates those soaring melodies from Palms, like on this song. And it was beautiful when he did it with Palms. That was some of his most beautiful work, but this tops it. So I think this album is not what I expected, but that is a good thing, because White Pony wouldn't have been what people expected when that album released. I can only imagine what people are thinking, like, this is a metal band, new metal band or whatever, and they're aggressive, they have like attitude, angst, and maybe they had like 2 or 3 like quieter songs, and then an album full of mostly quiet songs that were atmospheric and like a little bit progressive. That would have seemed weird at the time. But with this album, it's already getting a great reception, and I'm surprised by that, because I thought it would be divisive. I feel a little divisive towards it, even though I think it is a great album and I think it'll grow on me. It's not the type of Deftones album that I prefer. I prefer the more heavy yet dreamy type albums. That's why Diamond Eyes is my favorite album from them, and that's the one I come back to the most. But I think I'm really proud of them. Like, I had that overwhelming feeling while I was listening to this, because they finally found a way to make their sound like fully accessible, and for all of them to have equal input and get what they want out of the band, and it comes together beautifully. And I feel like what they were trying to become, like the music from the 80s, like The Cure and the Smiths, at least that's what Chino wanted it to kind of become. They've kind of done that, like the metal or hard rock version of that, and they sound so confident and full of life and rejuvenated that I'm just so happy for them that they're still kicking, they're still making great, even classic albums 25 years after they released their first album, and 32 years after they first started. They started in '88, the year I was born. It's insane to think about. With that all being said, for now, I think I'm giving this album a 9 out of 10 or a 4.5 out of 5. I think this is a great album, and I think it'll only grow on me. Yeah, I can't be happier that they're releasing new music and that it's as good as it is. So I think that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm just gonna have a little snack. I'm gonna go find where I threw that snack. Hopefully my dog didn't take it. So I'll catch you guys later. Bye. Oh.